Sir, don't make this
This is a
difficult. We're about
medical
to take
device.
off.
It's FAA approved for all phases of
I
flight.
don't care what you think it is. All electronics off
Ma'am,
now.
I'm not trying to be difficult. This is a CPAP machine and it's allowed to
Are
stay
you
on.
seriously arguing with me right now?
I'm not arguing. I'm telling you what the law
The
says.
law? I'm the authority on this.
Flight attendant Emily Carter had no idea who she was talking to. The man in seat 12C wasn't just some passenger trying to be difficult. He was a retired Air Force colonel with 23 years of military aviation experience. He had served on the FAA advisory board. He had literally helped write some of the regulations she was now violating. And in the seat directly in front of him, another passenger had already pulled out her phone and started recording everything. In the next 18 minutes, Emily would lose her job, the airline would lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this incident would become required viewing in aviation training programs worldwide. Before we continue with this unbelievable story, I need you to do something. Drop your country or state in the comments right now. And if you want to see more stories about people who know their rights and stand up to authority, smash that subscribe button. This is about to get crazy. Thank you. Colonel Derek Holloway, retired, was 51 years old. He had spent 2 decades in the Air Force, most of it as a transport pilot flying C-17 cargo planes. After retiring from active duty, he had been asked to serve on the FAA's Aviation Rulemaking Advisory Committee, where he spent 3 years helping develop and refine regulations for commercial aviation safety. He knew federal aviation regulations better than most pilots. He certainly knew them better than the average flight attendant. Derek had a medical condition called sleep apnea. It's a common disorder where breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep. To manage it, he used a CPAP machine, a small device that keeps airways open by providing continuous positive air pressure through a mask. The device was about the size of a lunchbox, FAA approved, and specifically exempted from electronic device restrictions under federal regulations. Derek flew frequently, usually 4 to 6 times a month for consulting work with various airlines and aerospace companies. He had used his CPAP machine on hundreds of flights without any issues. Flight crews were generally aware that medical devices were exempt from shutdown requirements. Most attendants just asked to see the device, confirmed it was medical equipment, and moved on. This flight was different. It was a Tuesday morning, Delta Flight 743 from Atlanta to Seattle. Derek had boarded early, settled into his economy seat 12C, and set up his CPAP machine on the tray table. He wasn't planning to use it during the flight. It was a daytime trip, but he always kept it accessible in case he needed it. The machine was plugged into the seat power outlet, charging for his connecting flight later that evening. Emily Carter had been a flight attendant for Delta for 12 years. She was 43 years old, known among colleagues for being strict about rules and not particularly patient with passengers who questioned her. She had received multiple complaints over the years about her attitude, but nothing that had resulted in serious discipline. She was used to passengers doing what she said. She expected compliance, not conversation. When Emily started her pre-flight cabin check, she noticed the device on Derek's tray table. To her, it looked like some kind of electronic equipment. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't look closely at it. She just assumed it needed to be turned off for takeoff. "Sir, I need you to turn off that device right now," she said, her tone already carrying an edge. "We're about to take off." Derek looked up from the book he was reading. "This is a medical device. It's FAA approved for all phases of flight." He said it calmly. Matter of fact, he'd had this conversation a few times over the years with newer crew members who weren't familiar with the exemption. Usually, it ended right there. The attendant would look more closely, realize it was a CPAP machine, and move on. Emily didn't move on. "I don't care what you think it is," she said, louder now. "All electronics off, now." Derek felt the shift in her tone. This wasn't going to be a simple clarification. "Ma'am, I'm not trying to be difficult, but this is a CPAP machine. It's exempt under 14 CFR Part 1 21.305. He cited the specific regulation, word for word, the exact federal code that exempted portable medical devices from electronic restrictions. "Are you seriously arguing with me right now?" Emily's voice was getting louder. Other passengers were starting to turn and look. "I'm not arguing," Derek said, keeping his voice calm and level. "I'm telling you what the law says." "The law?" Emily leaned in closer, her hand on the back of his seat. "I'm the authority on this aircraft. What I say goes." "Actually, FAA regulations are the authority," Derek replied, "and you're currently violating them." Quick question for everyone watching. Have you ever been in a situation where someone in charge was completely wrong but acted like they were right? Type yes or no in the comments. Emily's face flushed. "Excuse me?" You need to watch your tone. My tone is fine, Derek said, still calm but with a slight edge now. But you need to check your training manual because you're about to make a very expensive mistake. That's it, Emily snapped. You're getting off this plane. She turned and walked quickly toward the front of the aircraft. Derek sat there, book still in his hand, knowing this was about to escalate beyond reason. He'd been in enough high-pressure situations in his military career to recognize when someone was more interested in winning than being right. In the seat directly in front of Derek, a passenger named Jennifer Park had been listening to the entire exchange. She was a 28-year-old paralegal from Atlanta. When Emily's voice had gotten loud and aggressive, when she'd said, "I don't care what you think it is," Jennifer had turned slightly in her seat and quietly pulled out her phone. She held it up just enough to record over her headrest, capturing everything behind her. She'd seen enough viral airline videos to know when someone was abusing their authority. Emily returned 2 minutes later with the captain. Captain David Reynolds was a veteran pilot with 28 years of experience. He looked tired, like someone who didn't want to deal with passenger drama before an early morning flight. "Sir, I'm Captain Reynolds," he said, his tone trying to be authoritative but also wanting to resolve this quickly. "I understand there's an issue with a device." Derek stood up, not in a threatening way, just to be at eye level for the conversation. "Captain, I'm Derek Holloway, retired Air Force Colonel. I have a CPAP machine here, which is FAA approved for all phases of flight under 14 CFR Part 1 21.305. Your flight attendant is demanding I turn it off, which violates federal regulations for portable medical devices." Jennifer kept her phone recording, making sure she captured the captain's face and responses. This was important. Captain Reynolds looked at the device on the tray table. He looked back at Derek. Then he looked at Emily. "Is that a CPAP machine?" "He says it is," Emily said, her arms crossed. "But policy is all electronics off." "CPAP machines are exempt," the captain said, his voice carrying a hint of frustration. "They're medical devices." "I don't care," Emily said, and Derek saw the captain's expression change. He needs to comply with crew instructions. He's been argumentative and disrespectful. "Ma'am, I've been neither," Derek said calmly. "I cited the specific regulation. I explained that this device is exempt. You chose to escalate rather than verify what I was telling you. Do you think the flight attendant was on a power trip? Let us know below." Captain Reynolds was in a difficult position. On one hand, federal regulations clearly exempted medical devices. On the other hand, his flight attendant was insisting the passenger was being difficult. And in airline culture, supporting your crew often took precedence over being technically correct. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to deplane," Reynolds said. "We can resolve this at the gate." "Captain, with respect, you're making a mistake," Derek said, his voice still measured. "I am not violating any regulation. I am not being disruptive. I am sitting quietly with an FAA-approved medical device. If you remove me from this aircraft, you are violating federal disability accommodation laws and discriminating against me based on a medical condition. I strongly suggest you consult with your operations center before proceeding." The captain hesitated. Something in Derek's tone, the way he spoke, the specific language he used, made Reynolds second-guess himself. But Emily was standing right there, arms still crossed, clearly expecting the captain to back her up. "I'm sorry, sir, but you need to leave the aircraft," Reynolds said. "I will leave under protest," Derek said. "And I'm informing you right now that this removal is unlawful and that I will be filing a complaint with the FAA and pursuing legal action against Delta Airlines." The entire cabin was silent now, 43 passengers watching this play out. Jennifer, in the seat in front of Derek, kept her phone steady, angling it to capture his calm professionalism and the crew's unreasonable behavior. Several other passengers had their phones out too, recording from different angles. Derek gathered his things, unplugged his CPAP machine, and walked off the aircraft with as much dignity as he could maintain. Emily watched him go with a satisfied expression. Captain Reynolds returned to the cockpit, already feeling uneasy about what had just happened. As Derek walked up the jetway, Jennifer quickly stopped recording, pulled up her contacts, and sent herself the video via email and cloud backup. She had no idea who the man was, but she knew what she'd just witnessed was wrong, and she knew this video needed to be preserved. Derek walked directly to the Delta service desk at the gate. The agent there, a young woman named Sarah who had watched the situation unfold through the jetway window, looked nervous. "I need to speak with a supervisor," Derek said calmly. "I was just removed from Flight 743 for having an FAA-approved medical device." "I'm so sorry, sir," Sarah said, already pulling up information on her computer. Let me get the duty manager. While he waited, Derek pulled out his phone and started typing detailed notes about every part of the encounter while it was fresh in his memory. Names, exact quotes, times, everything. He was documenting everything he could remember. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to get something even better than his notes. Jennifer Park had followed Derek off the plane. She had watched him walk to the gate desk, had seen how calmly he was handling the situation, and had made a decision. She approached him as he stood at the counter. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was on that flight. I was sitting right in front of you. I recorded the whole thing. Everything the flight attendant said, everything the captain said, all of it. I think you're going to need this." Derek turned and looked at her. "You recorded it?" Jennifer nodded, pulling out her phone. "I'm a paralegal. I've seen enough airline abuse videos to know when someone's getting screwed over. You were completely professional and they were completely out of line. I've already backed this up to the cloud, but I can send it to you right now. What's your email?" Derek gave her his email address, still processing what was happening. Within seconds, his phone buzzed with a video file. He opened it and watched the first 30 seconds. There it was. Crystal clear video and audio. Emily saying, "I don't care what you think it is." The captain removing him despite his citing of federal regulations. Everything. "Thank you," Derek said, looking at Jennifer with genuine gratitude. "You have no idea how important this is." "I think I do," Jennifer said with a slight smile. "Make them pay for this." The duty manager arrived 10 minutes later. His name was Robert Porter, and he'd been with Delta for 19 years. He dealt with thousands of passenger situations, but something about the way Derek was calmly reviewing video on his phone made him very nervous. "Mr. Holloway, I understand there was an incident on the aircraft." Derek looked up from his phone. "Yes, I was removed from the flight for using a CPAP machine, which is specifically exempted from electronic device restrictions under federal aviation regulations. I informed both the flight attendant and the captain of this exemption, cited the specific regulation, and was removed anyway. Another passenger recorded the entire encounter on video, and I'm filing formal complaints with the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and pursuing legal action under the Air Carrier Access Act." Robert felt his stomach drop. A CPAP machine, video evidence, a retired military officer threatening federal complaints and lawsuits. This was bad. "Sir, I sincerely apologize," Robert said. "There was clearly a misunderstanding. Let me get you on the next available flight." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Derek said, his voice still calm but firm. "This was your flight attendant not knowing the regulations she's supposed to enforce, your captain not verifying those regulations before removing a passenger, and your airline discriminating against someone with a medical disability. I will take the next flight, but this is far from over." Robert spent the next 20 minutes trying to salvage the situation. He upgraded Derek to first class on the next flight. He provided meal vouchers. He offered Delta Sky Miles. Derek accepted it all politely, but made it clear that none of this prevented him from pursuing formal action. On the new flight 3 hours later, Derek sat in first class with his CPAP machine on his tray table. The flight attendant on this crew, an older woman named Susan, glanced at it, smiled, and said, "CPAP machine, no problem at all. Glad you have it." That simple interaction, that basic knowledge of regulations, was all the first crew had needed, but they hadn't had it. When Derek got home to Seattle that evening, he spent 4 hours preparing his formal complaints. He filed with the FAA Aviation Consumer Protection Division. He filed with the Department of Transportation Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. He filed an Air Carrier Access Act complaint. He filed a formal complaint with Delta's corporate office. Each complaint was detailed, included timestamps, quoted the specific regulations, attached the video recording, and outlined exactly how the airline had violated federal law. Type facts if you think Derek was right to document everything. The FAA takes violations of disability accommodation seriously. When they received Derek's complaint with video evidence of a passenger being removed for using an FAA-approved medical device, they immediately opened an investigation. They contacted Delta's legal department. They requested crew training records. They demanded an explanation. Delta's legal team watched the video recording and immediately recognized this as a significant problem. The flight attendant had explicitly refused to recognize an exempted medical device. The captain had removed a passenger despite being informed of the relevant regulation. And the passenger was a former Air Force colonel who had served on an FAA advisory board. This was a nightmare. Emily Carter was suspended pending investigation 3 days after the incident. When interviewed by Delta's internal review team, she maintained that she had been enforcing safety regulations and that Derek had been argumentative. Then they showed her the video recording, her own face, her own voice, saying, "I don't care what you think it is, and I'm the authority on this aircraft," all captured in high definition. The review team asked her if she was aware that CPAP machines were exempt from electronic device restrictions. She said she'd never been trained on that. They pulled her training records. The exemption for medical devices was covered in initial training, recurrent training, and the crew manual that every flight attendant was supposed to review regularly. She had signed acknowledgement forms saying she'd reviewed this material. Captain Reynolds was questioned separately. He admitted that he knew CPAP machines were exempt, but felt pressured to support his crew member. He acknowledged that he should have consulted with operations before removing the passenger. The investigation found that he had violated company policy and FAA regulations by removing a passenger who was in compliance with federal rules. 4 weeks after the incident, Emily Carter was terminated. The termination letter cited failure to follow federal regulations, discriminatory treatment of a passenger with a disability, providing false statements during the investigation, and creating a situation that exposed the airline to significant legal liability. She tried to appeal through her union, but the video recording made her case indefensible. Captain Reynolds received a 60-day suspension without pay and was required to complete remedial training on disability, accommodation, and passenger rights. He was also removed from his position as a check airman, which meant he could no longer train or evaluate other pilots. It was a significant blow to his career and reputation. But the consequences for Delta were even more substantial. Derek's attorneys negotiated a settlement that sources familiar with the case said was in the low six figures. The settlement included a formal written apology from Delta's CEO, a commitment to enhance training on disability accommodation, and an agreement that the incident would be used as a training case study. More significantly, the FAA hit Delta with a civil penalty of $350,000 for violating the Air Carrier Access Act and related regulations. It was one of the largest fines ever assessed for a single passenger disability incident. The FAA made it clear that removing a passenger for using an approved medical device was completely unacceptable. Delta revised its entire crew training program on medical devices and disability accommodation. The incident with Derek became a mandatory case study in initial and recurrent training for all flight attendants. The video recording, with faces blurred for privacy, was shown in training sessions across the airline industry. "I'm the authority on this aircraft" became an example of exactly the wrong attitude for crew members to have. The incident also led to changes in how Delta handled passenger complaints. The airline created a rapid response team for disability accommodation issues, implemented a direct escalation path for medical device disputes, and began requiring supervisory consultation before removing any passenger claiming a disability exemption. What do you think about how this was handled? Comment your thoughts below. 6 months after the incident, Derek received a personal call from Delta's Senior Vice President of Operations. The executive apologized again, explained the changes the airline had made, and asked if Derek would be willing to consult with Delta on improving their crew training. Derek agreed on the condition that he could speak candidly about what had gone wrong. He spent the next year working with Delta's training department, helping develop scenarios and guidance for crew members on handling medical device situations. He emphasized one key principle: when a passenger cites a specific regulation, especially about medical equipment, don't argue, verify, ask to see the device, consult the manual, call operations, but don't immediately assume the passenger is wrong. Emily Carter never worked in aviation again. The termination from Delta, combined with the high-profile nature of the incident, made it impossible for her to get hired by another airline. She eventually left the industry entirely. In later interviews with journalists covering airline passenger rights, she maintained that she had been following policy and that Derek had been difficult. The video recording told a different story. Derek continued flying frequently for his consulting work. He always traveled with his CPAP machine, and he never had another problem. Most flight attendants recognized the device immediately. On the few occasions when a newer crew member asked about it, he calmly explained what it was, they looked it up if needed, and everyone moved on. The way it should have worked from the beginning. The story of Flight 743 became well known in aviation circles. It was discussed in pilot forums, flight attendant communities, and airline management meetings. It became shorthand for what happens when crew members prioritize authority over regulations, when they refuse to listen to passengers who know the rules, and when airlines fail to properly train their staff on disability accommodation. But perhaps the most important lesson was about documentation. Jennifer Park's video recording was the difference between a he said, she said dispute and an open and shut case. Without that recording, the airline could have claimed the passenger had been disruptive or aggressive. With the recording, there was no ambiguity. Emily's own words and actions convicted her. The captain's decision was indefensible, and Delta had no choice but to take full responsibility. The fact that the documentation came from an uninvolved third party made it even more powerful. Jennifer had nothing to gain or lose. She was simply recording what she witnessed, and that objectivity made the video unimpeachable. For passengers watching this story, the message is clear. Know your rights, especially if you travel with medical equipment. The regulations are publicly available. Read them, understand them. And if a crew member tells you something that contradicts those regulations, politely but firmly cite the specific rule. Don't just say, I think I'm allowed to do this. Say, under 14, CFR Part 1, 21.305, this device is exempt. Be specific, be knowledgeable, be calm. And if you witness injustice happening to someone else, do what Jennifer Park did. Pull out your phone, record it. You might be providing the evidence that makes the difference between accountability and another swept under the rug incident. Jennifer, by the way, never asked for anything in return. She didn't want media attention. She didn't want recognition. When Derek tried to thank her with a gift card, she refused. I just did what was right, she told him. Someone needed help, and I had a camera. That's all. Her video changed an industry, ended 2 careers, and helped protect the rights of millions of future passengers with disabilities. All because she saw something wrong and decided to document it. Do you think all passengers should record interactions like this? Drop your answer in the comments. For airline crew members, the message is equally clear. Federal regulations supersede your personal preferences or assumptions. If you don't know the rule, look it up. If a passenger is citing specific regulations, don't dismiss them. Verify, and never ever say, I'm the authority when discussing federal law. The FAA is the authority. The regulations are the authority. You're there to enforce those regulations correctly, not to make up rules as you go. 3 years after the incident, Derek was invited to speak at an airline industry conference about passenger rights and crew communication. He stood on stage in front of 300 airline executives, pilots, and flight attendants, and he told the story of Flight 743. He played the video recording with Jennifer's permission. The room was silent except for Emily's voice saying, I don't care what you think it is, and the visible tension captured on camera. When it was over, Derek said something that stuck with everyone in that room. This incident wasn't about me being right and the crew being wrong. It was about a system failure, a failure in training, a failure in communication, a failure in respect. One flight attendant didn't know a basic regulation. One captain didn't verify before acting. And one passenger had to fight for a right that should have been automatic. We can do better. We have to do better. The applause lasted 2 full minutes. Derek Holloway still flies regularly. He still uses his CPAP machine, and he still carries a printed copy of 14 CFR Part 1, 21.305 in his travel bag, just in case. But he's never needed it again, because after Flight 743, the message got out. Airlines trained better. Crews knew the rules, and passengers with medical devices could travel without fear of being unlawfully removed. One incident, 18 minutes, $350,000 in fines, 2 careers destroyed, an entire industry forced to look at itself and improve. All because one person knew the regulations and refused to back down when someone in authority was wrong. If this story taught you something or opened your eyes to passenger rights, do me a favor. Share this with anyone who travels frequently, especially anyone who travels with medical equipment. They need to know their rights. They need to know they can stand up to authority when authority is wrong. And they need to know that documentation can make all the difference. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel for more stories about people who know their rights and aren't afraid to use them. Hit that subscribe button right now. We need these stories out there. We need people to know they have power, even when facing someone with a uniform and a title. Drop a comment and tell me, what's your biggest takeaway from Derek's story? Is it the importance of knowing regulations, the power of documentation, the need for better training? Let me know. Thank you for watching this all the way through. Thank you for caring about rights and accountability. These stories matter. Your engagement helps them reach people who need to see them. Remember, regulations exist to protect you, but they only protect you if you know what they are and you're willing to cite them. Derek Holloway knew. Flight attendant Emily Carter didn't. And that made all the difference. See you in the next story.